Marcus Chen sat in the third row of Xenobiology 201 and tried not to fall asleep. The classroom was warm, and Professor Kivax had a voice like buzzing insects that made everything sound boring, even when she talked about fascinating things like acid-blooded predators from the Vega system. Around him sat students from 12 different species, and Marcus was one of only 3 humans in the room. He was 16 years old, with messy black hair and eyes that always looked a little tired because he stayed up too late reading adventure novels on his tablet. Under his desk sat a small carrier cage made of reinforced plastic with air holes on the sides. Inside the cage, something moved and made a small chittering sound. "Quiet, Sergeant Whiskers." Marcus whispered and reached down to tap the cage gently. The creature inside settled down, but its black eyes continued to watch everything through the air holes. Sergeant Whiskers was a honey badger from Earth, and he had been with Marcus since the boy was 13 years old. The doctors had given Marcus the animal as an emotional support companion after his parents moved them all to Station Verdant 7 for their research jobs. Marcus had struggled with the change and the loneliness, and the honey badger had helped him feel less alone. Most of the alien students thought Sergeant Whiskers was cute in a strange way. They would look at the small furry creature with his silver-gray back and black belly and say things like, "What a pleasant little Earth mammal," or "How nice that humans bond with such gentle creatures." None of them had ever seen a honey badger in action. None of them knew what the species was capable of on Earth. Honey badgers were famous for being the most fearless animals on the planet. They attacked lions and leopards without hesitation. They ate venomous snakes for breakfast and shrugged off bites that would kill other animals. They could dig through almost anything, and they never ever gave up once they started something. But here on Station Verdant 7, the alien species just saw a small mammal that made cute sounds and followed a human boy everywhere. Professor Kivax was explaining something about symbiotic relationships when the first explosion shook the station. The lights flickered, and students screamed in various languages and frequencies. Marcus grabbed his desk as the floor trembled beneath his feet. Everyone remained calm, Professor Kivax said, but her voice had gone high and panicked, and her wings were buzzing rapidly. A second explosion came from somewhere closer, and then the emergency alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed across the ceiling, and a computerized voice announced that there was a hull breach in Sector 7. Marcus reached down and grabbed the handle of Sergeant Whiskers' cage. The honey badger inside had gone completely still and silent. His small black eyes were fixed on the classroom door, and he was listening with an intensity that Marcus had rarely seen before. The door exploded inward. Marcus saw them clearly in the flashing red light. They were Kethvari Raider 6-limbed reptilian creatures with scales the color of dried blood and eyes like yellow fire. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy, and they moved with the confidence of predators who had done this many times before. Everyone knew about the Kethvarathi were slavers who raided the edges of civilized space and took people to sell on black markets in distant systems. They were fast and brutal and very, very good at what they did. The lead raider pointed a device at the classroom and swept it across the terrified students. 3 humans, he announced in a hissing voice that made Marcus's skin crawl. "Take them." 2 Kethvari rushed forward and grabbed Marcus before he could even think about running. He felt their clawed hands on his arms, and they were impossibly strong across the room. He saw them grab the other 2 human students as well. Sarah Park was crying, and James Rodriguez was trying to fight back, but a Kethvari hit him in the stomach and he doubled over, gasping. "Move," the lead raider commanded. They dragged Marcus toward the door, and he twisted around trying to see his carrier cage. It had fallen from his hands when they grabbed him, and now it lay on the floor near his desk. The door of the cage had cracked open from the impact. "Wait!" Marcus shouted. "My animal, please let me." A prayer. HFY shoved him hard, and Marcus stumbled through the door. Forget your pet human. The raider hissed, You have bigger problems now. They dragged him down the corridor, and Marcus could hear screaming from other classrooms. The HFY had hit the whole station at once. It was a coordinated attack, and station security was overwhelmed. Marcus looked back one last time, but he could not see his classroom anymore. He could not see Sergeant Whiskers. The honey badger was alone in the classroom. Professor Kithax and the other students huddled against the far wall. They were afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid to do anything that might bring the raiders back. No. One looked at the small carrier cage lying on the floor. No one saw the cage door swing open. No one saw the honey badger emerge and stand perfectly still, sniffing the Thalaxian. Student named Vrix watched from behind an overturned desk. He was a crystalline being with faceted eyes that could see in multiple spectrums, and he observed the small earth creature with curiosity. The honey badger was not panicking. It was not hiding. It was tracking something. Vrix watched as Sergeant Whiskers lowered his nose to the ground where Marcus had been sitting. The creature made a sound deep in his chest, like a growl and a rattle combined. Then the honey badger moved toward the door, not running and hiding like a frightened pet should, moving with purpose, moving with intent. Creature paused at the doorway and looked down the corridor where the raiders had taken the humans. Then Sergeant Whiskers disappeared into the ventilation shaft near the floor and was gone. Vrix would later tell the station security chief what he had seen. The chief would dismiss his concerns completely. It's just a therapy pet, the chief said. It's probably hiding somewhere, scared out of its mind. Poor little creature. Vrix did not argue, but he remembered the look in the honey badger's black eyes. That was not fear. That was something else entirely. That was the look of a predator who had just identified its prey. The HFY had taken 17 captives from the station, including 3 humans. They loaded their prisoners onto their ship called Prophet's Edge and detached from the station within 20 minutes of their initial attack. It was a clean professional operation. Captain Sethrak congratulated his crew on another successful raid. The humans would sell for excellent prices, and the other species would bring good money too. None of them noticed a small hole in the cargo bay where something had chewed through the emergency seal and foam. None of them knew that they had brought something aboard, something small, something angry, something that would not stop until it found its boy. Sergeant Whiskers settled into a dark corner of cargo bay 3 and waited. He could smell Marcus somewhere on this ship, and honey badgers were very patient when they needed to be. The holding cells on Prophet's Edge were cold and dark and smelled like fear. Marcus sat with his back against the metal wall and counted the other prisoners around him, 17 in total, including himself and the 2 other human students from his posted school. Sarah had stopped crying, but her eyes were red and swollen as she kept looking at the door like she expected the raiders to come back. Any moment. James had a bruise forming on his face where a HFY had hit him, and he was breathing slowly, trying to stay calm. The other prisoners were from various species that Marcus recognized from his classes. There were 4 Quelix with their soft blue skin and large dark eyes. There were 6 Dalaxians, including 2 who looked very young. There were 3 Morvani traders who had probably been grabbed from a cargo ship, and there was 1 Scythian elder whose silver scales had gone dull with stress. Marcus tried to be the calm one because someone had to be. They want to sell us, he told the others quietly. That means they need us alive and healthy, so they will not hurt us unless we give them a reason. How do you know this? One of the Quelix asked with a trembling voice. I read about the HFY in Xenosociology class, Marcus said. They are businessmen in their own terrible way and damaged goods sell for less money. It was not much comfort, but it was something the prisoners settled into an uneasy silence, and Marcus tried not to think about what he had left behind. Sergeant Whiskers was alone on the station. His honey badger, who had slept at the foot of his bed every night for 3 Here's his companion who had helped him through the loneliest times of his life. Marcus closed his eyes and hoped that someone on the station would find the little creature and take care of him. He did not know that Sergeant Whiskers was much closer than he thought in the cargo bay 3 levels below the holding cells. The honey badger was exploring his new environment. He moved through the darkness with the careful patience of a born predator. His nose told him everything he needed to know. There were many of the reptile creatures on this ship. Their scent was everywhere, sharp and musky and raw, and somewhere above him was the scent of his boy Marcus. Smelled like home and safety, and the treats he always kept in his pockets. Sergeant Whiskers would find him. But first, the honey badger needed to understand this strange new territory. He spent hours mapping the cargo bay. In his mind, he found the ventilation shafts that connected to other parts of the ship. He found the maintenance tunnels that ran behind the walls. He found the dark corners where he could hide and watch and wait. Honey badgers in the wild learned their hunting grounds with incredible thoroughness. They remembered every rock and every hole and every path. Sergeant Whiskers applied the same instincts to the alien ship around him. On the bridge of Prophet's Edge, Captain Sethrak reviewed the inventory of their captured cargo. The HFY captain was old for his species, with scars across his snout that told stories of past battles. He had been raiding civilized space for 40 years, and he had become very rich doing it. The 3 humans will bring the best prices, his second-in-command reported, young and healthy, and one of them appears to be from a wealthy family. Excellent, Sethrak hissed with satisfaction. What about the others? Standard prices for the Qualics and Morvani, and the Thalaxians are young enough to be trained easily. Sethrak nodded and dismissed his officer. Everything had gone perfectly. Raid was clean, and the cargo was valuable, and they would be in HFY space within 2 weeks. Nothing could go wrong now. Cargo Bay 3, a junior crew member named Desik entered to perform a routine inventory check. He was young and bored, and he did not pay much attention to his surroundings. He walked between the storage crates, tapping his datapad and recording the contents. He did not notice the small shape watching him from the shadows. He did not hear the quiet rattle that came from somewhere to his left. Desik turned a corner and found himself face to face with something he did not recognize. It was small and furry, with a silver-gray back and a black belly. Its eyes were like 2 pieces of polished obsidian, and they reflected the dim light of the cargo bay. "What are you?" Desik said, and reached toward the creature. That was his last mistake. Honey badgers did not give warnings twice. Desik had time to scream for exactly 11 seconds before the sound stopped. The creature was faster than anything Desik had ever seen. Its claws were sharper than they had any right to be, and it attacked with a ferocity that the young HFY could not have imagined from something so small. When the other crew members found Desik, they could not understand what had happened. The wounds were savage and thorough, and nothing in their prisoner manifest could have done this. "Check all the cells," the senior officer ordered. Something must have escaped. They checked and found all 17 prisoners exactly where they had left them. Then, what killed him? Someone asked. No one had an answer. Captain Sethrak ordered the cargo bay sealed and a full search of that deck. They found nothing. The honey badger had already moved to a new location. He had mapped enough of the ship to know where to hide. In the holding cell, Marcus heard the distant alarms and the sound of running footsteps. Something is happening, James whispered. Maybe someone is coming to rescue us, Sarah said with hope in her voice. Marcus did not say anything, but somewhere deep in his chest, he felt a strange flicker of emotion. It was impossible, of course. There was no way, but he knew his honey badger. He knew what Sergeant Whiskers was capable of when he was protecting something he loved. The HFY crew was afraid now, even though they did not want to admit it. They moved through the ship in pairs, and they kept their weapons ready. They jumped at every sound and every shadow, and In the darkness between the walls, something small and fearless continued to hunt Sergeant. Whiskers had found the scent trail. He knew which direction led to his boy, but the honey badger was smart enough to know that he could not simply walk up to the cell and free Marcus there. Were too many of the reptile creatures in the way, he would remove them one by one, as many as it took. He had no fear and no mercy, and absolutely no intention of stopping that. Was the thing about honey badgers that the Cathvari did not understand. That was the thing about Earth. Creatures that the galaxy had not yet learned. They did not give up, they did not back down, and they protected their own with a fury that defied all logic and reason. In his cell, Marcus lay down and tried to sleep. He dreamed of home and of a small furry creature curled up at his feet. Did not know that his dream was hunting through the ship toward him, coming closer with every passing hour, patient and relentless and absolutely unstoppable. The second death came 6 hours after the first. A Cathvari engineer named Varax went into maintenance shaft 7 to check on a power fluctuation. He never came out. His partner waited at the shaft entrance for 20 minutes before going to look. For him, what he found sent him running back to the bridge screaming. Captain Sethric looked at the report and felt something he had not felt in decades: fear. 2 crew members dead in less than a day, and no one could explain how or why. It must be one of the prisoners, his second-in-command insisted. Something they brought aboard that we did not detect. We scanned them all, Sethric hissed back. There was nothing dangerous on any of them. Then what is killing my crew? Sethric did not have an answer. He ordered every available crew member to search the ship from top to bottom. They worked in groups of 4, now too afraid to go anywhere alone. They checked every cargo bay and every storage room and every maintenance shaft. They found nothing, but the deaths continued. The third victim was found in a supply closet with his throat torn open. The fourth was discovered in a corridor near the engine room. Each time the wounds were the same: savage and thorough and impossibly fast. The surviving Cathvari began to whisper about curses and demons and angry spirits. They were a superstitious species underneath their brutal exterior, and this situation made no sense to them. Something was hunting them on their own ship, and they could not find it or stop it. In the holding cell, Marcus could feel the tension in the air when the guards came to deliver food there. Movements were nervous and jerky, and they kept looking over their shoulders. Something is wrong with them, James observed quietly. They are scared, Marcus said. Of what? Marcus did not answer because he did not want to say what he was thinking. He did not want to hope because hope was dangerous. But he knew his honey badger. He remembered all the times Sergeant Whiskers had shown his true nature. There was the time a maintenance drone had come too close to Marcus, and the honey badger had attacked it. Without hesitation, there was the time a larger student had tried to bully Marcus, and Sergeant Whiskers had put himself between them, growling with his teeth bared. There was the time Marcus had been sick with fever, and the honey badger had refused to leave his bedside for 3 days. Sergeant Whiskers was small, but his love was enormous, and his courage was beyond measure. If there was any way for the honey badger to reach this ship, then he would have found it. And if he was on this ship, then the Cathvari were in terrible trouble. Captain Sethric interrogated the prisoners himself. He stood outside the cell with 4 armed guards and pointed at the 3 humans. You brought something aboard my ship, he accused. What is it? Sarah shook her head. We do not know what you are talking about. Do not lie to me, Sethric snarled. My crew is dying, and it started when we took you from that station. James stepped forward. We were scanned, and we have nothing, and you know that. Sethric stared at them with his yellow eyes burning with anger and suspicion. Then he turned to Marcus. You were the one carrying the animal cage. The captain said. What was in it? Marcus felt his heart jump, but he kept his face calm. Just my emotional support animal, he said. A small mammal from Earth, and he was left behind on the station. What kind of mammal? A honey badger. Sethric pulled up information on his datapad and looked at the entry for the species. The Galactic database described it as a small omnivorous creature native to Earth listed. Under temperament was the word docile. The entry noted that they were commonly kept as pets and therapy animals. There was nothing alarming in the description at all. Therapy pet, Sethrak said with contempt. That would not explain what is happening here. He turned away and Marcus allowed himself to breathe. Again, the Galactic databases had been written by species who had never actually encountered a honey badger in action. They had looked at the small size and the cute face and assumed they were harmless. They did not know that honey badgers attacked lions. They did not know that. Honey badgers ate venomous cobras like snacks. They did not know that pound for pound, the honey badger was one of the most fearless and dangerous creatures Earth had ever produced. The HFY would learn by the end of the second day. The death count had reached 9. The remaining crew was in a state of barely controlled panic. They refused to go anywhere alone, and some of them refused to leave the bridge at Al-Sethrak. Reviewed the security footage for the 100th time. In one clip, he caught a glimpse of something small and fast moving through a corridor. It was just a blur in the dim light, and he could not identify what it was. That, he said, pointing at the screen. What is that? His officers gathered around and watched the footage. It is too small to be one of the prisoners. Someone said, it moves like a predator. Another observed, but it is tiny. And how can something that size kill 9 of our crew? Sethrak had no answer. He only knew that his ship had become a death trap and he was losing control in the ventilation system above Deck 4. Sergeant Whiskers rested and cleaned his claws. He had been working hard and he needed to conserve his energy. The honey badger had killed 9 of the reptile creatures, and he was not finished. He could smell his boy getting closer with every level he climbed. Marcus was somewhere above him, scared, but alive. Sergeant Whiskers would reach him soon, but there were still many of the bad creatures in the way. The honey badger was not worried. He had faced worse odds in the wild. He had fought snakes and jackals and hyenas, and he had won every time. These reptiles were bigger than him, but they were soft. They had never faced anything like a honey badger before. They did not know how to fight. Something that felt no fear. Sergeant Whiskers finished cleaning himself and began to move again. He had learned the ship's layout completely now. He knew every vent and every tunnel and every dark corner. He knew where the guards stood, and when they changed shifts, he knew which paths would take him to his boy. The hunt was almost over, but for the HFY, the nightmare was just beginning. In his cell, Marcus lay awake and listened to the distant sounds of the ship. He could hear alarms and shouting and running footsteps. He could feel the fear that had infected the entire crew, and somewhere in his heart he knew his honey badger was coming for him. Nothing in the galaxy would stop Sergeant Whiskers from reaching his boy. Not walls or guards or an entire ship full of slavers. The bond between a human and their animal was something the HFY had never understood. They saw it as weakness and sentimentality and foolishness. They were about to learn how wrong they were. By the 3rd day, the Prophet's Edge had become a ship of ghosts. The HFY crew moved through the corridors in tight groups with weapons drawn and eyes wild with fear. They had lost 12 of their number to something they could not see or catch or understand. Captain Sethrak had not slept in over 40 hours, and his scales had gone pale with stress. His second-in-command approached him on the bridge with a desperate suggestion. "Captain, we should space the cargo," he said. "The humans, at least. Because whatever curse they brought must be connected to them." Sethrak turned on him with fury in his yellow eyes. "Do you know how much those humans are worth?" he demanded. "They will pay for my new hunting grounds, and I will not throw away that fortune because you are afraid of shadows. But Captain, our crew will be disciplined." Sethrak snarled. "We are HFY raiders, and we do not run from prey." But even as he said it, Sethrak was not sure he believed his own words. Something was hunting them, and he could not stop I've made a decision that would seal the fate of everyone aboard. Set course for emergency speed toward home space," he ordered. "Once we reach HFY territory, we will dock at a proper station and hunt this creature." With proper resources, the ship's engines roared to life at maximum power, but they would never reach HFY. Space Sergeant Whiskers had spent 3 days learning, and now he was ready to act. Honey Badger had identified the key systems of the ship through careful observation. He had watched the crew and learned which panels they used to control the lights and the doors. He had found the power conduits that ran through the walls. He knew exactly how to create chaos on Deck 4. The lights suddenly went dark. Emergency lighting flickered to life, casting everything in dim red shadows. The crew members stationed on that deck immediately panicked. "What happened to the power?" someone shouted. "Something chewed through the main conduit," an engineer reported. "The damage is extensive." In the darkness, something small and low and fast began to move. The first HFY on Deck 4 died without making a sound. His partner turned around to find him gone, and then felt something hit him from behind. The screams that followed echoed through the ship's communication system on the bridge. Captain Sethrak listened with growing horror as his crew reported in, "Deck 4 is overrun. We cannot see the attacker. Send help, please send." And then, Silent Sethrak dispatched a team of 6 heavily armed raiders to Deck 4. 3 of them came back. They were shaking and covered in the blood of their companions, and they could barely speak. "It is small," one of them managed to say, "small and gray, and faster than anything I have ever seen." "It does not stop," another added. "We shot at it, and we hit it, and it just kept coming." "What is it?" Sethrak demanded. None of them had an answering the holding cell. Marcus heard the chaos and felt his heart begin to race. The cell door was controlled by an electronic lock tied to the ship's main power grid. When the power on Deck 4 failed, the locks throughout that section flickered and reset. Marcus pushed against his cell door and felt it move. Lock was not engaged properly anymore. "The door," he whispered to the others. "I think we can open it." James came over, and together they pushed. The door swung open with a soft click. "We need to move now," Marcus said, "before they restore power." The 17 prisoners emerged into the dark corridor. Emergency lights cast long shadows, and the air smelled like smoke and fear. "Which way?" Sarah asked. Marcus was about to admit that he did not know when he heard a familiar sound, a soft chittering noise coming from somewhere ahead. His heart nearly stopped. "Follow me," he said. He moved down the corridor toward the sound, and the others followed close behind. They turned a corner and stopped. There, in the middle of the passage, sat a small creature with a silver-gray back and black belly. His fur was matted with dark stains, and his claws were red with blood. But his eyes were fixed on Marcus with an expression of pure joy. "Sergeant Whiskers." Marcus breathed. The honey badger made a happy sound and ran toward him. Marcus dropped to his knees and caught the small creature in his arms. He could feel tears running down his face as he held his companion close. "Good boy," he whispered into the rough fur. "Such a good boy." The other prisoners stared in disbelief. "That is the creature," James said slowly. "That little thing killed all those raiders." Marcus stood up with Sergeant Whiskers cradled against his chest. "Honey badgers are tougher than they look." He sighed. A HFY appeared at the far end of the corridor with his weapon raised. Before anyone could react, Sergeant Whiskers launched himself from Marcus's arms. The raider screamed and fell back as the honey badger hit him like a furry missile. 5 seconds later, the screaming stopped, and Sergeant Whiskers returned to Marcus's side. The prisoners were silent with shock. "We need to get to the escape pods," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Or better yet, the bridge to send the distress signal. The bridge will be heavily guarded." One of the Marvani traders warned Marcus. Looked down at his honey badger. Sergeant Whiskers looked back up at him with those dark eyes full of trust and loyalty. "I do not think that will be a problem," Marcus said. They moved through the ship as a group. With Sergeant Whiskers leading the way, the honey badger seemed to know exactly which paths were safe and which ones held danger. Twice they encountered HFY guards, and twice Sergeant Whiskers dealt with them before Marcus could even feel afraid. The other prisoners watched in amazement as the small Earth creature dismantled enemies twice his size. "How is this possible?" the Scythian elder asked. "How can something so small be so dangerous?" Marcus thought about how to explain it. "On Earth," he said, "size does not always matter, and courage does, and determination does, and honey badgers have more of both than any creature I know." They reached the deck where the bridge was located. Marcus could see 4 HFY guards standing outside the main entrance, and beyond them, through the transparent doors, he could see Captain Sethrak himself. The captain was alone on the bridges. Crew had either fled or died, and he was the last defender of his ship. Sethrak saw the prisoners approaching, and his eyes went wide. Then he saw the small creature walking beside the human boy. He saw the blood on its claws and the fearless look in its black eyes. And finally, Captain Sethrak understood what had been hunting his crew. He raised his weapon and aimed at Marcus. "Call off your beast," Sethrak commanded, "or I will kill you where you stand." Marcus stopped walking, and Sergeant Whiskers stopped beside him. The honey badger looked at the captain and made that rattling sound deep in his chest. It was a warning, the only warning he would give. "You cannot kill all of us before he reaches you," Marcus said calmly. "And even if you kill me, he will not stop, and he will never stop, because that is what honey badgers do." Sethrak's hand was shaking. He had commanded raiders for 40 years, and he had faced enemies of every species, but he had never felt fear like this. The small creature's eyes held no mercy, and no hesitation, and no doubt it would kill him without a moment of concern for its own safety. Sethrak dropped his weapon. Marcus walked forward and picked it up. "Send a distress signal," he told the captain. "Tell any ships in the area that you need assistance." Sethrak did as he was told. He had no fight left in him. The nightmare was over. Sergeant Whiskers sat beside Marcus and finally allowed himself to relax. He had found his boy. He had protected his boy. Everything else was unimportant. Marcus reached down and scratched behind the honey badger's ears. "Good boy," he said again. "The best boy." Sergeant Whiskers closed his eyes and purred with satisfaction. The Galactic patrol vessel Righteous Dawn arrived within 6 hours of the distress signal. Captain Thesara of the Quellic species had served in the patrol for 30 years and thought she had seen everything. She was wrong. The boarding party found the Prophet's Edge drifting with minimal power, and most of its crew either dead or fled via escape pods. They found 17 former prisoners in control of the bridge with a battered but defiant human boy standing at the center, and they found a small furry creature sitting at the boy's feet, cleaning blood from its claws. Captain Thesara listened to Marcus Chun's account of the past 3 days with growing disbelief. She looked at the bodies of the HFY raiders. She looked at the damage reports from throughout the ship. Then she looked at the small animal currently accepting treats from the human's pocket. "You are telling me," she said slowly, "that this little creature killed 14 HFY raiders by itself." Sergeant Whiskers is very protective, Marcus said with a small smile. "But he is so small." "Yes, ma'am." "And the HFY are trained warriors." "Yes, ma'am." "And this animal is classified in our database as a therapy pet." Marcus shrugged. "The database might need to be updated." Captain Thesara did not know what to say. She ordered her medical team to examine all the prisoners and provide whatever care they needed. She ordered her security team to sweep the ship and document everything, and she ordered her communications officer to file a report with Galactic Patrol headquarters that she knew no one would believe. The story spread across the galaxy within weeks. News services picked it up and ran with headlines that seemed too strange to be true. Therapy pet destroys slaver crew. Earth creature kills 14 raiders. The honey badger incident raises Questions about Terran fauna. Scientists and military analysts studied the reports with fascination and concern. They pulled up everything they could find about honey badgers from Earth's databases. What they found was alarming. Honey badgers attacked creatures 10 times their size without hesitation. They were immune to most venoms, including cobra bites that would kill much larger animals. They could dig through almost any material and squeeze through impossibly small spaces. And, most importantly, they never gave up. One researcher wrote a paper that was widely circulated among galactic security services. Earth's ecosystem, he noted, produced some of the most dangerous predators in known space, and the humans did not just survive among these creatures, but actually domesticated emotional bonds with them. And this raises serious questions about human psychology and what it means that they consider such animals comforting. The black market slave traders were the first to change their behavior. Within a year, every raider captain in 3 sectors knew the new rule: never take a human who is bonded with a Terran animal. You cannot scan for what you are bringing aboard. You do not know what that cute pet is capable of. The risk is simply too great. The Galactic Integration Academy on Station Verdun 7 updated its policies regarding emotional support animals. All HFY species were now required to have full behavioral profiles in addition to basic health documentation. The entry for Mullivora capensis was extensively rewritten under temperament. It now said, extremely aggressive when provoked or when bonded human is threatened, and do not be deceived by small size or docile appearance. Rix, the Thalaxian student who had watched Sergeant Whiskers escape his cage, was interviewed by several news services. I saw the look in its eyes, he told them. Everyone else thought it was just a scared pet. But I knew better, and there was no fear in that creature at all, and there was only purpose. What kind of purpose? The interviewer asked. The kind that does not stop. Rick said, the kind that will walk through fire and fight through pain and never ever give up until the job is done. And I think that is what humans see in these animals. And I think that is why they love them so much. Marcus Chun returned to the academy and finished his education with honors. He was something of a celebrity now. But he did not enjoy the attention. He just wanted to study and learn and live quietly with his honey badger. But the questions never stopped. Reporters wanted to interview him, scientists wanted to study Sergeant Whiskers, military officials wanted to know if honey badgers could be trained for combat operations. Marcus declined them all. Years later, he became a xenobiological consultant specializing in human-animal bonds and their applications. He traveled to conferences and stations across the galaxy explaining what humans had always known about their companion animals. We did not domesticate them because they were weak, he would say. We bonded with them because they were strong, and because their strength complemented ours, and because together we were better than either of us alone. He would gesture to Sergeant Whiskers, dozing in a carrier beside the podium. This creature would die for me without hesitation. He would say, not because I trained him to, but because he loves me. And I love him, and that bond is more powerful than any weapon. The alien audiences would look at the small furry creature with new eyes. They would see not just a cute pet, but a reminder of what Earth had produced, a planet of predators and survivors, and creatures that did not know the meaning of surrender, and the humans had emerged from that world not as the strongest or the fastest, but as the ones who could make friends with the monsters. Sergeant Whiskers lived for 12 more years. He grew fat and happy and lazy in his old age. He still slept at the foot of Marcus's bed every night, just as he had since he was 8 weeks old. When he finally passed away, Marcus buried him in a garden on a quiet human colony world. The headstone was simple. Sergeant Whiskers. It read, the bravest heart that ever beat. Other species came to visit the grave sometimes. They would stand there looking at the small marker and trying to understand what kind of world produces creatures like this, what kind of species calls them pets. What kind of bond could drive something so small to accomplish something so impossible? The answers were simple, but the implications were profound. Earth was not a gentle world, and humans were not gentle creatures, but they had learned to love and to be loved by things that shared their fierce spirit. The galaxy would never look at therapy pets the same way again, and somewhere out there another human child was bonding with another small furry creature, learning the same lesson that Marcus had learned, that size does not determine courage, that love does not make you weak, and that the smallest heart can hold the biggest fight. The HFY survivors never raided human targets again. They had learned their lesson in blood and terror, and they passed that lesson down through generations. Never underestimate the humans, never underestimate their bonds, and never ever underestimate what they bring with them, because Earth does not produce gentle creatures, and the gentle-looking ones are sometimes the most dangerous of all. Sergeant Whiskers had taught the galaxy a truth that humans had always known. Sometimes the smallest warriors have the biggest hearts, and they will move heaven and earth and everything between to protect the ones they love. That is the power of Earth. That is the spirit of humanity. And that is why you should never overlook the honey badger.